Welcome to the Comic Stands podcast. If you'd be so kind, would you mind introducing yourself?
Oh, hi, I'm Evan Dorkin. I'm a cartoonist and writer of comics and used to do some animation work. And that's it, I guess.
And of the comics that you've worked on, what would people know you from?
uh, I guess Milk and Cheese is the main thing from my solo work. And from my collaborative creator-owned work would be Beasts of Burden. The other books would be the books that I do myself would be Dork, which also was the Eltingville Club, which had an Adult Swim pilot back in the day, and which is on YouTube. And but I also do I did a lot Bill and Ted. A lot of people know me from back in the day, and these days I've been working on Blackwood, which I write. And I was also in Mad Magazine for 10 years and did some, my wife and I worked on Yo Gabba Gabba. So something in there, hopefully somebody knows us from.
Now, Evan, how do you usually describe your work in comics? Do you call yourself a cartoonist? Do you call yourself a comic book writer and artist? Do you consider what you do graphic noveling? Are you a graphic novelist?
I'm definitely not a graphic novelist, which just sounds awkward to me anyway. I mean, I realize we're stuck with graphic novel. I don't know how else, but everything's comics, to me. I'm cartoonist writer because I mostly did my own work for a long time, mostly write and draw my humor comics and but I've written a lot of comics. I've written comics, fell into it sideways because I always thought I was a writer, an artist who drew, if you follow. But I really feel like it turned out that I'm a writer. I mean, I always thought that I was an artist who wrote, but I think it turns out that I'm a writer who drew because I'm really not the best artist. I mean, I'm a good cartoonist, but I'm not a great draftsman, and a lot of the things that I want to work on, I can't draw, the genre stuff and things like that. And I've probably done more writing in the last 10, 15 years, a lot more writing, in collaboration, on creator-owned and work for hire stuff, licensed stuff, other Predator. We just wrote a Human Torch story for Marvel Snapshot, Sarah and I, and we've written for like, I don't know, 8 or 9 television shows back in the day. So cartoonist, my own stuff, writer on the other stuff. And I've drawn stuff too, but it's just cartoon. I like being a cartoonist. I like the tradition. I'm a fan of the whole field. And writer seems weird for me because like I don't, growing up, you thought a writer was like a novelist or a screenwriter, and I just have never been able to insert myself. Like I've never been able to say I'm an animation professional or a television animation writer, even when we were in the thick of it and working on it full time. I've never been able to kind of. It's one of the reasons I'm in therapy, I guess, is to be able to accept these things and accept compliments if I get them, and to just not feel defensive or it's hard to explain. I don't know if you've ever been around a lot of cartoonists. A number of them, like anyone else, there's a social awkward aspect to sitting in a room drawing when you're a kid or an adult and spending a lot of time alone and whatnot. And sometimes it's very, very hard to remember that you've achieved certain things and you should be, if not proud of them, just upfront about them and not. See, I'm doing what I'm talking about not doing. If somebody comes up to you at a convention and says, "I like your work," you should just say thank you rather than start to hem and haw, like a young kid showing their portfolio who apologizes for having old work. So yes, long story short, writer, cartoonist. Sorry.
No worries.
Well, I made hash of that, and I usually answer really long, but that was a weird one because I had trouble articulating it.
Speaking of conventions, we actually met briefly in 2007 at the MochaCon. You
Oh
were
God,
nice
no.
enough to sign a copy of the milk and cheese trade for me.
Thank you. Well, you were nice enough to buy it. And I'm glad you said 2007, because when you first said that we met at a convention, I was ready to go, oh no. Because yeah, back in the 90s, I did not have my convention shit together. And I was very like, there are definitely people who did not enjoy meeting me. So when you said 2007, I was like, oh, I was much better by then. I mean, I still F up, but cool. Yeah. Mocha, I behaved myself, I think, most of the time. Yeah. That was a good show back then.
Very cool. And I should also mention, just because we spoke briefly about your work in the music industry, that the very first time I saw your work was on the cover of a Roadrunner Records VHS tape. I
Oh
can't
my
remember
God.
what it was called, but it
It was
was
some metal. It was a
yeah,
metal stomp of
yeah,
videos.
exactly. Yeah.
You're the first person who's ever mentioned that. And that being your introduction to my work is really funny. That was an odd job. Yeah. Wow. I
Well,
forgot that was for Roadrunner. Yeah. That was a weird one. Because
it
it was an illustration job for something that was just out of the blue, and not band members not like a ska band or a punk band that I kind of knew, or who had written me in the comics. So it was just odd to get, back then I was still really knocked out. It was just really surprising to get a call from left field to do a role-playing game job, or an illustration job for a video. I mean, that's how old it was. It was for a VHS tape. That's funny. That's wild.
uh yeah, it was at the tail end of when I was collecting comics seriously and when I started getting more into music. And so it was a strange kind of thing where I realized that just because you were listening to death metal doesn't mean you can't also be into comic books, since Evan Dorkin from Milk and Cheese had done a Roadrunner artwork.
It's funny because I'm doing a collaboration with somebody outside of comics. I'm doing some illustration work for them, and the first place they saw my work was on a ska band out of Detroit. I was doing their 45s and CDs at the time, the exceptions, and that came from the comics. I mean, there was a lot of synergy in the 90s between alternative rock, whatever you want to call it, punks, ska, new wave, whatever, metal, everything, with comics, with independent comics art and mainstream art, and a lot of people were doing album art back then, and it was I love doing 45s and CDs. I wish that we had had computers back then so that the coloring would have. Sarah did all the coloring. We were doing them as animation cells originally. That was a black and white job, so there was no problem there. We haven't done much music art over the years. I mean, now there's so many places to go for artwork. If you want a cartoonist, younger bands are fans of younger artists generally. And the last thing I think I did was a CD cover we did for MC Frontalot, which was really neat. He's used comics artists on all his releases, but there was a really, I mean, there was Deadline magazine in the UK, was a magazine, was all comics and music, and that had heavy British scene at the time. But I was involved with a lot of punk scenes and music magazines. Milk and Cheese was being one of the funniest ones I got was a Finnish heavy metal fanzine was running Milk and Cheese strips and Dork strips. And, this is all through the mail back in the day. The Onion was running Milk and Cheese. I mean, it's not I was interviewed Maximum Rock and Roll and Fizz and Thorazine ran some of my stuff. It was a really cool parallel overlapping, I did t-shirts for bands. It was a lot. I love that. I missed that for sure. I mean, there was no money in it, but it was just, plus you got a lot of free CDs and comps of stuff. And, but it was just, the industries were all smaller then. Everything's opened up now. I mean, I never would have been doing an interview with someone in Malaysia back then, obviously, you know what I'm saying? It's really awesome that everything's opened up and decentralized, that people can get work from all over the world, that we can talk to people from all over the world, do projects together. But it certainly was easier to get work and to be involved with things when you were younger and the industries were smaller. You know what I'm saying? People who read, plus, we were all used to the mail. Everybody was trading zines, everybody was trading comics, everybody was trading music. It was a good time to be able to get into the industry. And I'm still knocked out that you found my work on that comp, because that is never brought up. That is one of the most obscure things I've done. It's just it's just funny. Plus, I feel really, really old right now. I mean, really old.
Before we get back to your work in comics, do you remember the name of the Finnish scene who were printing Milk and Cheese? Because
No,
I may have interviewed those guys.
that's funny. No, I don't. I had so much paper in our, we had so many. Sarah was doing Action Girl as a zine, and then as a comic, she was doing Mad Planet. She was involved very heavy. She comes out of zine culture out of Gainesville, Florida. She came out of No Idea. She was co-editor of No Idea, and then was doing Mad Planet. So we had so many pieces of paper in the house back in the 90s that we had to cut down on a lot of stuff. So I got rid of a lot of my mail, which I'm sorry I did. I wish I kept more of my mail. I have a very small box now. Sometimes you just get rid of stuff and then you regret it. But I took a lot of my stuff that was reprints from internet, and I would cut them up to just have the tear sheets of my stuff plus a cover, so I could remember what it was. So that's probably buried in the archives somewhere. I can't remember, but yeah, that was just one of the cool. It was just really neat. I have absolutely no idea what they said about my work in those things, but that was they paid better than some comics companies. They were really cool. I just had to, some people read your work and then would drop you a line and go, "Can I run a dork strip or a Milk and Cheese strip?" And I would say yes, whether, I basically said yes to everybody, whether it was a paying, whether they had $20 or nothing, because it was a great way to spread your work out there back in the day of lots of zines and free weekly alternative papers and things like that. Print was the thing, obviously. So no, I guess the answer to that, you want a one word answer? No, I don't remember. Rambling.
So let's get back to comic books. What drew you to the medium? What did you like about comic books?
No pun intended. It would be the drawing. I mean, I think that's what gets everyone into it at first. Your eyes connect to the drawing, and then you get sucked into the stories. The drawing, they said the drawings attract you to the comic. This is what we thought in the comic store when I worked, that, drawings attract you, the writing keeps you over the long term. I don't know if there are as many people who buy comics just for the art as there used to be back when I was younger, where you would follow George Perez or John Byrne or whoever, Brian Boland, or, to whatever they did, even if it was a book you weren't interested in. As a kid, I grew up in the 70s on newspaper comics and Mad Magazine and Marvel Comics. And Marvel was reprinting a lot of the Silver Age stuff, the classic stuff Kirby had drawn and plotted with Stan Lee. And so that was a world that I fell into. And I loved comics in any form. I mean, if a magazine in the doctor's office had comics in it, I would go immediately to those. There was cartoon books of dentist jokes, of hairdressing jokes in the offices when you'd be taken by your mom to places. And I would just, I loved the way cartoon art looked, whether it was the more quote realistic unquote superhero work or anything that was in the newspaper comics. But the formative stuff was probably like Peanuts in the newspapers and all the humor comics, Mad Magazine, all the artists in Mad Magazine, Marvel, and I love Tintin, which was reprinted and translated in a magazine called Children's Digest. And I had a subscription to that my mother got me early because I like to read. So, and there were comics in there, and I just never disliked any kind of comic. And I loved animation. I loved cartoons, and those were my twin. You know, and absolutely. If you read my work, you could tell pretty quickly. If you read my older comics, that I'm a pop culture junkie. Back in the day, I watched untold amounts of television. I was an insomniac who would just sit and watch television all night. I like books, fan magazines, monster movies, wrestling. I mean, music. I was just into whatever I was into. Comedy. I loved SCTV and Python and all the stuff that was on PBS that was brought over from England. Old movies, old show business. I mean, and if I was into it, I wanted to know how it worked and who was doing it, things like that. I had subscriptions to fan magazines like Funny World, which was an early animation magazine that Mike Barrier did. Famous Monsters, the Monster Times. I mean, I had a subscription to Foom. I was a big fucking fan of what I was into. I was into hardcore, and I wanted to get into the industry. I reading all the things, my brain jived with it in the way that all creators' brains jived with it. I wanted to be in comics or animation or film, but I drew a lot. I copied comics like a lot of people growing up. And I think that I was telling stories and unaware that the drawing was secondary to the storytelling because I didn't have the guts to ever write prose, and I still don't. Comics, I mean, I'm not damning with faint praise. Comics is my medium of choice. I absolutely love cartooning and comics. I mean, you could spend my room is filled with comics and books and stuff like that, and toys and junk. But comics was the first thing that I guess I felt that I could do possibly, even though my work was terrible and remained terrible even when I got into the industry. But comics caught my eye, and I used to joke that you'd pick up a comic back in the day, and the newsprint would get into your fingers, and it would be like in your blood. The ink would be in your blood, and that's what got people hooked on comics. But it's hard to explain, the attraction to. I have some original art that I love collecting. If I had money, I would definitely be buying originals from newspaper strips and comics. I love looking at other cartoonists' work. I love looking at the process. I'm a dealer user. I'm a big fan, and when the circumstances are right, I love making comics. As I get older, it's harder because I took shitty care of my arm and my hand. But there are still times that a couple days ago I did a long shift working on some illustrations and commissions, and I was in such a great mood after I finished up the shift and went to bed. I was just like, it's a great way to live. It's not maybe a great living, but I enjoy. This is what I used to do when I was young. I was 13, 14. On Saturdays, I would just watch television and draw on the kitchen table until about 6 a.m. Watch the sun come up and go to bed, and I can still do that and sometimes make some money at it. Making things up on paper is just a great way to tell stories, and you can control them yourselves. You don't need the budget of animation. You don't need the budget of filmmaking. I wanted to become an animator for quite a while. I just fell in love with animation. Again, the process, the people, but I realized in film school that I did not want to work that collaboratively. I mean, you can make your own films, obviously, but no one would see them back in the 80s. But I also wanted, comics is beautiful because you can tell the entire story yourself over how many pages, or you can tell a story in one page. Animation is incredibly difficult to sit there and do, and also professionally, you're basically doing chunks of the work. You're telling, you're working on one character, or you're working as an assistant animator doing fills, or you're doing design work. And there's not much to call for 2D these days, as there has been. I guess maybe there is a lot of call for. I don't watch a lot of television right now. But anyway, there's another long answer. I don't know. I love it. I guess people like Don Martin and Jack Kirby and Will Elder, Al Jaffe, Ditko, Stan Lee, although, whatever issues I have with Stan Lee, I love that stuff. I just loved all kinds of comics except DC. I didn't get into DC comics as a kid. I don't know why.
How old were you when you started drawing your own comics?
Little kid. I mean, I have a bad memory when it comes to a lot of being exact on stuff, but I was always drawing. I was the kid who drew in class, even when I was young. And I was copying Peanuts. 6, 7. I was starting to try to make my own comics, panel to panel, with word balloons, probably when I was 10, 11. I wish that I had the comics I made. I destroyed them. I destroyed everything I drew back then. I don't think I kept anything until I was maybe 17 or 18. But I've destroyed some of my professional pages too. I mean, everything from the books that I first got into the industry with, I threw out. I was always very harsh on my stuff. I've only come to be comfortable with it in maybe the last 10, 15 years, 10 years, 5 years. But yeah, I made a Fantastic Four comic that I still remember working on because I remember how much I cheated to draw the characters. I never learned. I was self-taught, so I had a lousy teacher. And while I was enamored of the process, there wasn't a lot of the process of making comics the way there is now. There wasn't even how to draw comics the Marvel way, which was how to copy Jack Kirby and John Buscema, really. But they really didn't tell you. I mean, you could read the credits. Penciler, I guess you use a penciler. Inker, I guess you use ink. But I had no idea what the materials were. I was very sheltered. No older siblings, no friends who were older who were into it. I didn't learn about rapidographs until I was in high school. I didn't learn about proper inking tools until high school. I was kind of afraid to ask questions and deal with being taught, if that makes sense. So I tried to do everything on my own and failed. But I was enthusiastic because I didn't know how terrible I was for a long time. But I drew a Fantastic Four comic, and I really wish it was ambitious. I colored it, I stapled it. It was like 12 pages or something like that. But I didn't like to draw faces. So I always drew the Human Torch on fire so I could obscure his face. I drew the Thing up close a lot because he was a monster and it was more fun to draw monsters. I was scared of drawing girls, so the invisible girl was always those dots, those lines that showed her being invisible. But because I didn't understand underdrawing and drawing the full figure and then making the dot, she just looked like a bunch of dirt, gnats in a form of a person. And Mr. Fantastic, I would always put him his head would be very small in the background and his hands would stretch up to the foreground so that I could block his face. So this is how I approached comics. So it's amazing that I have a comics career because all I tried to do was cheat and get out of drawing the things that you need to know how to draw. I should have understood that I should have worked on those things rather than kept avoiding them. But yeah. I was always drawing comics, and then I was always destroying my comics because they sucked. I guess I knew I sucked deep down, yeah, if I was destroying everything.
How did you learn your technique?
Copying comics and trying to get better once I realized what I was terrible, how bad I was, especially when I realized that people were like, back in the 90s when I was becoming known by a small audience for the humor comics, because I wanted to be a Marvel Comics artist when I was a kid. My goal was to get how small, because I'm a very small thinker, unfortunately. I've always hobbled myself with being down on my work and myself. So even while I was getting work and I was getting raises at Marvel or whatnot, I was starting to get very anxious, because the more attention I got working on Bill and Ted and Predator and things like that, and then Milk and Cheese doing better, um, and then winning a couple of awards, instead of feeling propelled by that, I felt terrified of that, because I realized it was easier for me to work when nobody was paying attention to my work. And because that felt a lot more like working at the kitchen table in front of the television, and watching monster movies and Saturday Night Live and whatever. And I think the people that I copied, I mean, everybody copies generally when they grow up, even if it's not comic book people, because now people are, we're getting a lot of cartoonists who did not grow up on Marvel or DC comics, on direct market comics. They're growing up on animation, or they're growing up on manga, which is comics, but let's call it manga so you know what I mean. On anime, which is animation, but they're coming up with a lot of different artistic and cultural influences than everybody who got into comics practically in the up till the 90s, which was superhero comics in general, published by Marvel and DC in general. We all copied who we liked growing up. I love Jack Kirby, but I also love Don Martin and a bunch of the newspaper cartoonists. And the thing was, I wanted to try to be more like Jack Kirby and the Buscemi's. I mean, there were people who I realized their technical ability was beyond me, like Gil Kane. And I never learned how to do things properly. I never learned the basics. I still am bad at it. I mean, I still have to really, really work hard and throw out drawings because of I don't know the fundamentals, and I don't have a rote system of, this is how you draw hair, this is how you draw drapery, how you draw clothing. If I'm lazy and I don't look at reference material, like I didn't know about reference, that you should be looking at life and things like that until later in my life. And when I talk to younger cartoonists, or I talk to a class or anything like that, or to an interview that talks about craft, I always talk about how I love the idea of teaching, but I don't feel confident about teaching based on my technique or my abilities, because I'm not sure how I put things together. It's very intuitive. Only until the last decade or two have I really been able to sit down more and think about what I'm doing. But there's less time to screw up and to redo when you're working professionally and you're on a deadline. I've always had deadline trouble because of the way I work, and because of the length of time it takes me to finally let go of a page or let go of a script. So it's hard to, like, people go, well, you should practice your inking. I'm like, yeah, I could practice my inking, or I could work on the job that I've been hired to do. As much as I would love to practice on my inking and love to practice to learn how to draw better. All I do is improve on the next job, I hope, and put more time into it and try to make a better, try to figure out better ways of doing things. But when I was growing up, it was copying like most people, and eventually you get it. Unless you are a Xerox machine and you're doing something like Rich Buckler, who could ape other people, or when he was starting out, Keith, I can't remember his name now. He does a lot of stuff for DC, but he was aping Kirby, and then he was aping Munoz and Sampaio. Certain people get stuck, like a lot of people who worked for Neil Adams at Continuity still draw like Neil Adams. And people who were working with Wally Wood tended to draw like Wally Wood in a lot of places. You can tell when certain people are enamored of a certain artist, if you know what I mean. And my style is such a weird, inorganic mix of Marvel Comics, Mad Magazine, animation, horror movie. I took from it's a pastiche of all the things I was interested in. That eventually you develop your style and you stop copying at a certain age. My style, if you look at my stuff in the '90s, was very, very boxy and inorganic, and it had energy, but it did not have, it wasn't fluid. And I've tried to make my work a little bit more fluid and a little more, I don't know. I didn't go to art school, as maybe it's evident. Uh, I don't know things like lighting. I'm terrible at perspective. I will try these things and I will fail and I will try them again. So eventually you get to a point where there's some muscle memory in your art. But unlike a lot of artists, I can't bang out the same drawing. And I can't even draw milk and cheese the same way twice sometimes. They look the same to the reader, but I don't have a good system of breaking the figure down, the human figure or even a cartoon figure down. Uh, when I'm on top of my game, what I'm doing best is when I'm really, really being diligent, this is what I'm trying to do these days, is to sit there and do honest underdrawing, usually in blue pencil or red pencil, and then I'll light box it or I'll work over it on pencil. I tend to waste a lot of time that a lot of people can move past. I can't draw in ink very well unless I'm, just goofy doodles, but I can't draw professionally. I can't do loose pencils. And I wish I had an example of something, but I have to pencil very tightly for my work, for my best work. Sometimes it stiffens up the work, but yeah, I'm not answering this great. I'm not very articulate when it comes to how I draw. But basically, I realized at a certain point, I'm still fighting this. I'm not a Marvel artist. I'm not a superhero artist. I'm not a genre artist. I can do a version of that, but I can't do it professionally the way that it's ever been in vogue. Even when I did something like Fight Man, there has to be a comedic angle to the way that I do my work, or a cartoony angle. I'm a classic cartoonist. I'm not. I'm somebody who would be better in a newspaper strip or Mad Magazine than working for Marvel, which was what I wanted to do. So there's a lot of Marvel comics stuck in my DNA that I have to fight a lot of the time because I don't know. I'm not good at drawing an 8 heads high anatomically correct body. I can't do it certainly on the fly at a comic convention for a sketch, which is why I don't like sketching or people watching my work. I make a lot of mistakes. I erase a lot, and I'm never quite sure what's going to come out of the pencil. I'm not good at visualizing what I want to do. I just eventually kind of get to it. I walk it into the bullseye like in darts. I throw a lot of darts on a particular drawing usually. That's why my commissions take me a long time. There's a lot of work before I get to the ink. And I guess that's my technique, is fumbling forward, but trying to keep it good, be mindful of what I'm doing and what's the best way to get this effect across in the drawing, to be funny or to be creepy or to be, bold or to hang back. Again, it's why I think I'm more of a natural writer than I am a natural artist. I look at the art that I did as a kid when I was class artist in high school and whatnot. I was not good. And if you look at the people who were doing work that were my age, the work that young people are doing online, Instagram and Twitter makes me want to kill myself. I shouldn't joke like that since I did try that a year and a half ago. I shouldn't joke about that, sorry. But whole other topic, right? But it's amazing the artwork that people are doing right now is such professional and creative quality. It's beautiful. They do color. I don't know how to do color, really. I could do very, very basic color, but my color theory is, I've always joked, my color theory is I should color that. I have no idea what values are or how to do painting. So I'm a very, very nuts and bolts, plain dinosaur cartoonist. Paper, pencil, pen. I have, oh, I can't find it, but basically, I guess the secret to my technique is this. It's white correction pen and a lot of throwing out drawings in the recycling. as I trash a lot, and light box. I have a light box here that I can't show because my computer will fall down if I pull it. But I'm a trepidatious. I walk very slowly up to the edge of the diving board before I dive. I don't, I guess that's, I have no fucking idea. Maybe I should have just said that. It'd be easier if we were in person. I could actually show you things like while I'm drawing and go, here's what I'm talking about. So I hope that made some sense to people. This is why I teach by my failures. I was saying before, when I speak to people, I can't speak on the basis of my achievements because I don't understand them as well as my failures. I can pick apart things that I've done wrong, or I do wrong, or I didn't like about my work, or I know that I did wrong at the time. Now that I look back on it, I can teach through that easier than I can teach through more positive means of technique and style, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh God.
When
Yeah.
you head to ink, what's your process normally? You mentioned that you pencil very tightly.
I do.
Once you head to ink, I mean, you mentioned rapidographs. Are you mostly using technical pens?
I like dip pen. I like a Hunt 102. I like using a G pen, a Japanese G pen, and nibs. The problem with them is that they take a long time. They're not as efficient. I mean, there was just something, I'm sure a lot of artists could, something about sitting there, whether you like the brush. I don't have the hand for the brush. I don't have the feel for the brush. I need to feel the point of the tool on paper, especially since I kind of press down very hard and I kind of have a problem with really grip. I white knuckle it. I read about a cartoonist who was talking on Twitter about how they had to get a mouth guard because he would he would clench his jaw so much from anxiety while working that it would hurt. I have the same problem. It's kind of like I feel like I'm going through a curve, or like when a car, I forget what it's called, when a car hits water and starts to slide.
Like
But
hydroplaning?
yeah, I feel like I'm hydroplaning when I ink. When I'm penciling, I feel like, I don't know, it's not, I feel like I'm shoveling snow. I know what I have to do, and there's a certain amount you got to get it done, and you can fuck around and clean it up, but you'll get to a certain point, and then when the ink comes in, I used to really beat myself up about having to have a perfect line or get it right the first time, and then you start learning when you meet other cartoonists and stuff. Everybody does something different to get to that line. There are people who do things that they have a perfect line because they edge out their line in rapidograph and fill it in, which I was surprised to hear about a certain artist. That's not a knock. It's beautiful. But I always thought everybody just goes in there with the comic book style of a brush or a pen. Boom, they're done. They have one line and they move on. Now you can watch people work, which is amazing to watch people's, TikToks or their YouTube videos. I would love to have more time and sit there, but you can watch something like the Monben show, which shows manga artists interviews and process and working on their comics, and sitting there and watching, God, I've lost his name, but the guy who hosts the show did 20th Century Boys, and I'm blanking. I can rattle this stuff off a lot better when Monster, and but what's the one that I really like? Pluto. And watching him ink is just, and they talk about their process. Junji Ito did an episode. The woman who did Princess Jellyfish is an episode. I mean, it's amazing to watch the techniques, and you don't even have to like somebody's art to be able to learn something from what they do. It's kind of like I used to say, if you walked into, like, Hot Topic was like a nauseating store in a lot of ways. I mean, I was too old to enjoy it. I would have loved it as a kid, I'm sure. But as an adult, I found my favorite jacket in a Hot Topic. The whole place, I couldn't stand anything in it, but in the back, I found a Dr. Martens plaid jacket that I loved. So you can learn something from any artist, any creator, even if you don't like their work, because they might have an insight or a technique that works for you anyway. And being able to see people do their work now is just, it demystifies the industry. And if there's one thing that I've always liked doing when I talk at conventions or on panels or to students, it's demystifying things, everything from how to deal with your contracts. I'm not a lawyer, but the fact is people don't like to talk about that. Contracts, page rates. Sometimes you're just never going to win because you're not friends with the editor, or you're never going to get hired because you're not friends with the editor, or, all the, sometimes it's, I guess I talk, I'm seen as negative and bitter by a lot of people. I'm not bitter. I can be negative, fuck sure. But I think that if a few people in the industry come to things from the other side, the non-team comics, everything's great side, you can, you need to learn those things too, because every cartoonist gets ripped off when they start off. I got ripped off. You hope now there's a lot more people who will know not to sign a certain contract, not to work for a certain rate, not to work for a certain person or publisher, because it will be detrimental to them, that it will not be worth getting their name in print or getting their name on a screen, on a monitor. Because, yeah, I got ripped off once, and that was the last time I got ripped off in comics when I first came up. Inking, to me, is like etching in stone. So it took me a long time to realize that, well, I don't want to be sloppy when I ink. I want to be exact and make sure I'm working on the line that I want to work on. Also, that if I don't have pencils down, it's kind of like building a house without a structure, without a plan, and without having the posts and whatnot. If I'm making it up in ink, I'm going to fuck it up. I need to have pencils underneath there. And the tighter they are, the better it is for me. But sometimes you can't go super tight because you really have to get something done. My camera is probably not good enough to show pencils for something that I'm working on. I don't know. Can you see this at all? This is a fun strip that I'm doing for my Patreon. It's fairly tightly penciled. This was done in blue pencil, erasable blue pencil, and then I'm penciling over it to tighten up my line. When I'm sketching, I will often sketch. I'm redoing a deadline cover of Fugazi that I did back in the day as a commission for someone, and I'm reworking it in red pencil, and then I'll be going over this in blue pencil. Then I'll be printing it out and choosing the lines that I like best when I do a hard pencil for inks. If I'm comfortable with the subject, like if I'm doing a milk and cheese drawing, I'm not going to have to do super tight pencils. I can gesture, do gestures and stuff. But if I'm doing something like a superhero drawing for somebody, or I'm doing a cover and I don't know the characters, or I'm doing something with a lot of detail and figure work and a background, definitely a background, I'm going to have to sit there and really pencil it. And it takes me quite a while. I was talking to Mike Mignola after I did a Hellboy story for Hellboy Weird Tales, the first and only time I've met him. And we had a really interesting talk about process and stuff, because I was asking him questions while we were talking. I mean, I wasn't pestering him, but we were talking. He was asking me about something. I said, how do you? And he said that he says his process in a nutshell is he pencils slow and inks fast. And I get it, because you pencil hard so you know where everything goes, but you ink quickly so that you try to retain some of the energy, and also so you don't stiffen up too much. I mean, I can tell when I'm over worrying a page. That's one of the reasons that I do these really dumb. Okay, this is just at the set. I don't like this one. I'm going to be throwing it out because I didn't draw enough to do the silhouettes as well as I'd like to. It's a dopey drawing about my cat destroying stuff. I do these things for my patron, but I do those as a way to lighten up so that I'm not always drawing tight. If you know what I'm saying. I want to try to keep my hand at fighting my compulsiveness, my obsessive compulsiveness, which a lot of cartoonists have, um, um, and try to just keep a hand at doing things where the lines don't always have to meet. Not everything has to look super clean. Just get the joke across and don't worry about it. Don't worry about, don't worry about the background being concise. Just have fun and knock out a little autobio cartoon or a page of them. And that's something that I'm trying to keep going. I'm doing something on my Patreon where I'm drawing this experiment where I'm doing a horror comic. I have no idea what I have a little bit of idea now, but I've done about 75, 80 panels. I'm doing them on index cards, and I'm drawing them almost without pencils, and until a theme sort of broke out. But it was a way to just keep my hand in, literally, at drawing without too much thought, without overburdening myself with the process. And it keeps me a little looser when I approach an actual drawing. I don't normally get asked questions on technique and stuff like that, so I would have had some examples, but everything I have is either I can't show it or it's. I mean, this is just some jerky drawing. I mean, this is an example of a small thing that I'm just doing for myself. I draw these little cartoony versions of horror characters, and I was selling them in October, and there's some blue pencil and then some regular. This is not a tight drawing for me. It's for a good inker. A good inker would go in there and just finish the whole damn thing in, like, I don't know, 10 minutes. It's amazing to me to watch all the people who can just post drawing after drawing. Francesco Francavilla and Becky Clune and all these people, and all these people whose work I don't even know. They've got 2 drawings a day, watercolor drawings. Man, I just, because of my arm and because of my brain, I can't. I don't like showing off finished work. Sometimes I'm embarrassed when I really have to not compare myself to other people. People like your work for you, if you know what I'm saying. It's like, you might not think you're attractive, you might be socially awkward, but the people who like you for you, not for what you wish you were going to be. And it's the same, wish you were, for whatever problems you had growing up from your parents. But your artwork's the same way. I mean, the thing is, if you're getting hired to do things and you're selling artwork, sometimes, I don't have monstrous, my prices are higher than some people's, I guess. I've heard people complain because they don't see cartooning the way that I draw as worth it as somebody who's doing, I don't know, Spider-Man, Superman. That's their problem. They should look up at comic strip originals that they wouldn't look like, cost. I mean, the value is in the talent and the people who like that particular talent. So you should knock yourself and compare yourself to other stuff. When I first sold something for over $1,000, I was just like, why? But that's the wrong way to look at it. The way to look at it is that somebody appreciates and likes it. And if I had money, I'd be buying stuff from people. So why wouldn't people buy stuff from you? You have to value yourself and look at yourself the way that others look at you as far as selling art, which I know a lot of cartoonists have issues. They don't know what to price their work as. I have big problems with that. It's hard to put a value on what you see yourself as, especially if you grew up with somebody who didn't like yourself. It's something that I'm actually working on in therapy and something I'm working on in my work. So it's really hard to judge my own work. But at the end of the day, the technique is the inking technique, the pencil is kind of subservient to the personality of the cartoonist, the energy, the attitude, the approach to the entire, not how you do feathering inking or how good is your line or how well do you draw a sexy woman. I can't, I don't, I never, how well you draw this or that. It's what do you bring to the page that people enjoy? And with my inking, I have a very thick line. It's very bold. There's a lot of detail, largely because I overcompensate for my work. So, I don't take my own advice all that great. But I enjoy doing textures. I like doing just the little, I like cross hatching. I like putting a lot of figures into a space, like I was saying before. I mean, if somebody asks me to do Milk and Cheese and Kitaro and they're a friend of mine, I'm going to put the whole Kitaro cast in there, and I'm going to do pointillism on the characters that Mizuki did, and my style throughout it as well. I mean, I grew up on detailed cartoonists like Will Elder and Kirby, George Perez. I liked it when there was a crowd scene, you actually saw a crowd, not two characters with a big shadow in the background. I like seeing the spectacle of things, and I'm off the subject of inking, but I mean, I guess this is still process. I mean, it's just what I tell people and what I try to tell myself when I'm feeling down on my work is that there are a tremendous amount of better artists than me out there. There are better writers out there than me, but I have a specific way of putting writing and art together on the page that no one else can do. Whether they like it, that doesn't mean it's the greatest thing on earth. But when you see an Evan Dorkin comic, that's what you're getting. You're not getting me doing anybody else's style. You're not getting me filling in and just phoning it in. It's not a house style at a company, and it's recognizable, and it has specific sense of humor, on emotional honesty and energy and vibrancy that comes from my personality, for good or for bad, that you don't get from, it's a different way that Shannon Wheeler does his comic, who you said you talked to. It's a different way that other cartoonists of my time and even of now do, and people are a fan of it or they're not. You have to live with that and just do what you enjoy doing, the way that you do it. And the only other thing I'd add is that I am still learning how to ink. I'm mostly using, I don't use rapidograph. I was so tentative with my inking growing up that I only used rapidographs, which gives you a very static style. It also takes forever. I can get more flexibility out of a dip pen, and I really enjoy them. But to work a little faster, also not to have wet ink on the page, because I'm a slob. I'm constantly screwing up and moving up. I finally gave in and started working with brush pens, which I thought was cheating, which is a stupid way to view anything. That unfortunately was an idea put in my head by some people back in the day, that if you didn't work with ink, or if you did anything with blue pencil underneath, you were cheating. And you got to do whatever you have to do to get the effect on the page. I mean, I wanted the originals to be sacrosanct. I wanted an original page to be clean and but now I'll slap I'm not good at using the computer or Photoshop, so I can't really do good cleanup or patches, but I mean, I'll patch it ahead and smack it back down on there, or I'll take a panel out and slap a new panel over it. All stuff that I should have been doing back in the day, instead of trying to rework the same drawing over and over. There comes a point when I'm inking that if I realize I'm bailing out a boat that has no bottom, you have to stop and just do it over. And in fact, the strip that I'm showing you right now, this is not healthy, but it's the third version of this, because I just did not like the way that it was. I did not like the way it was looking, and it's not like I'm doing this on a deadline. So this is the version I'm happiest with. It's also the version that, I did two versions to get to the way this one looked. If I was doing it professionally all the time, that would be a terrible way to make a living. And that's one of the reasons that I stopped making a living in comics, was because I would just shut down. Like when I was doing the last two Eltingville stories, I spent a year on those. It was a miserable, terrible time, and the kind of thing that I would not suggest anybody does unless they have a trust fund or a day job that allows them to just kind of keep working on the same pages and fixing them or making them worse. So there's a long answer for you, but I think it covers a lot of different things.
Absolutely.
I find inking really hard, but I also never learned. That was a hard one for me to self teach. So I'm a self teach to be self taught. So I'm still learning at that. Basically, I'm just trying to make an attractive image that does the job well. Working for Mad helped a lot, to be honest, because I was doing single images that were written for me and kind of art directed. So all I had to do was do an illustration of what they told me to do. And I tried to add jokes and make it as funny as possible. But the fact was, sometimes when you have all the, when you have, what's the word for it? I hate when I get stuck in words. When you have things that when you're limited, let's put it that, a terrible way of putting it, when you don't have options, it's hard. Sometimes it's very easy to get lost when I'm writing, because you can do you can go anywhere with your own stories. It's not like you're writing Superman and he must be Superman. And even then, you can choose your own adventures and get lost in second guessing on your plot. And in a drawing, I can get lost about how's the best way to do this. But when when your options are limited and there are actual, limitations put on you, you have to concentrate on the drawing more than thinking about the drawing in a writing sense. And Mad really helped me work on my inking, work on selling the joke, selling the image, doing an illustration. And that was a really good experience for me. Also weirdly enough, working on the Yo Gabba Gabba show, I did a lot of drawing for the Super Martian Robot Girl segments, and I had to do them quick. They had to be kind of big. They had to be simple and bold. And that's when I started working with Pit brush pens, and because I was like, there's no way that I can ink this with a dip pen to make these animation figures that I'm going to get used for flash animation. And I wanted them to be thick so that they'd shoot down well and have a certain style to them. Those were both really good experiences for honing my style, now that I think about it, because they were very utilitarian, and they were on tight deadlines, and they taught me to use new tools and to work in different spaces and sizes. So those were really good experiences to basically also teach me that I'm a cartoonist. I'm not a comics artist. Is there a difference? There sort of is. But also in my mind, a comics artist is a certain thing, for good or for bad, for true or for not. An artist is somebody who does, only comics, and kind of comes from the tradition of comics where it's broken down to penciler, inker, and you draw in a certain way. And back in the day, it was a house style. There was a Marvel house style and a DC house style to a large degree of what they like. And now there's sort of a house style too. They don't like foreshadowing. They don't like a large foreshadowed figure, hand or figure, the way that they used to. Comics seem to be, superhero comics at least, seem to be in a situation where they're trying to emulate the films with coloring effects and lighting and thinner lines and realism. Not everyone, obviously, but there's almost always a house look or a popular look to comics. I mean, Image era, Marvel 91, 92. I mean, there are eras that you could look at them and go, well, this is comics at a certain point, these kinds of comics. And I learned to finally just give up, that I was never going to be able to do that kind of thing, and that I probably shouldn't, and I still fight it. But I should be drawing, goofy, thick, not realistic cartoon comics, and yeah. So I mean, using brush pens, I like Tombows, which is a calligraphy pen, but there's a green one and a blue one. I don't know what they're really called. It's in Japanese, but they look like, my eyes are going. I have to wear glasses when I work now, but this is the green one. It's got a more flexible point. The blue one has a harder point. So I, use that for things that I want to have a less flexible line. And I don't use dip pen really anymore unless I can really just play around with something. I'd like to go back to it more, because there are certain things that have a hand feel, and I feel like I feel like my cross hatching is best with a dip pen. And I also just enjoy some of the effects you can get with it, and the flexibility that you can go from thick to thin. But it's not as fast to work with, and I'm not as talented a guy to just knock out stuff with that. So yeah, these days I use brush pens. I have some microns. I don't like them as much as some people do. I keep trying to use them. It might be a problem with my hand because I bear down so much on those. Because I'll destroy a pen pretty quickly. That's the other thing. They're not super expensive, but they're still, I have to buy like a ton of them at a time because I will treat it like a pencil. I treat everything like a pencil, and I snap my pencils sometimes. I would snap my Hunt 102s when I work, especially when I worked on Eltingville, because Eltingville was a very it was like the closest thing to kind of like it's like sometimes the page would reflect I would reflect what's going on with the page, and I would just get like really physically I would snap the pens on some of those panels where the characters were very, very angry. But yeah, I don't know what the hell. Ask me another question.
Well, one last question about your drawing process before we move on to your writing. You mentioned red pencil, using red pencil and blue pencil. Why both? What is the purpose of the red pencil that you don't get from
I first started using them when I was at NYU, working on in the animation classes that I took, and the red I used to use a very thick Prismacolor, the non-photo blue, but the problem is the ink it'd be sometimes hard to erase. It was hard to erase that, and it's very chunky and hard to work delicately. These days I use they're Prismacolor, the erasable the erasable blue, light blue, and the red. What is this? Carmine red. This is primarily what I use when I'm setting things up. Sometimes I'll pencil with the blue because it does erase pretty well. The reason I use that is the red pencil. Like a red pencil is like the first thing I'll lay down, and it could be messy, but it's also expressive. I find that I draw much more expressively when I work with the red pencil or the blue. And what happens is the blue, I'll go into. It's basically it's like an extra step, but I'll go in on the red pencil with the blue pencil and pick out lines that I think are strong and that I want to keep. And sometimes I can ink over that, but generally I still need to get an actual pencil over that and finally pick certain lines. But what it is that when I work in the red and blue pencils, I work very loosely, more scribblier, but I find lines better. And with a pencil, you tend to find if you fuck around with the pencil, it's kind of more permanent. You end up ripping the page apart. The blue pencil and the red pencil allow me to look at differences on the page. So it's almost kind of like I've got like two sets of sketches sometimes, lines that I don't think work, lines that I'm emphasizing. And also sometimes I will use the blue pencil just to emphasize, and then I'll scan it and print it out, and I'll use that as my pencils for light boxing. And then I'll just do a clean pencil over that. I mean, it's funny, the process is kind of like how it depends on the job. If it's something that's super tight that I really need tight penciling and details on because of the nature of the image or the nature of the job or both, I'll go through the whole process. If it's something like if it's milk and cheese, I just go to it. A lot of fun strips, I'll just go to it and just work it out in pencil and then ink over it. If I fuck up, I'll clean it up. But if I want something exact, I tend to need to, again, walk it into the bullseye. Red pencil, blue pencil, ink. That's a lot. And if I've got to work fast, I'll probably just do a quick sketch in red or blue. I mean, I just draw more freely. It's hard to explain. Something about it just frees me up. And I think a lot of people, I mean, there are people who use the red and blue pencil. A lot of them seem to be, they have an animation background where they've just picked it up because now, again, you can learn more about what artists do, look at their technique. But I guess it's an exploratory step, and it's good if you're nervous, you know. But a lot of the drawings I do in colored pencil have more life. I mean, sketches always have more life than inks, even great inks. There's just something about rough sketches that, I mean, artists talk about this whole time. They've got a certain immediacy and energy, and inks can take away from that. I mean, there are people who now, like, you know, they'll print their pencils out as blue pencils, so they'll just, I think that they just do finished artist pencils now, but because for the technology, you can just contrast those pencils tighter, and you've got beautiful, detailed ink-like art, and you don't even have to do the inking step. And a lot of stuff you see now, the old thing of, you know, you do these tight or loose pencils, and then somebody does a finishing job in ink or inks over it, and then the colors comes in and just kind of like fills everything in. Nowadays, the colorist is almost doing the inker's job on a lot of that art. Inking it, the penciler doesn't even draw in all the tones and lighting and whatnot. They indicate it. There's a lot less tight penciling, it seems to me. I mean, that's not true for a lot of people, but you'll see some things that are like, back in the day, the inker would have been like, I don't know what to do with this. Now the inker just kind of like does the contours and the outlines, and the colorist comes in and makes everything pop with textures and fills and lighting, and they make the contours of certain things and lighting effects and glares and things like that. It's very weird. I don't understand, you know, I don't, you know, it's a different way of approaching the page, obviously. But yeah, that's what the red and blue is basically, I guess, just, you know, I feel really comfortable using them. It allows for a lot of mistakes to be made right then and there that you don't have to throw out. You could just work over them. And it eventually gets me to my final pencils, or something that I can print out and light box and then do a very tight pencil over, because my lines have been worked over, picked out, decided upon. And then I'll go in with the pencils because I just don't have the confidence to ink on the light box. I actually have to ink something on the light box straight from pencils, and I'm a little nervous, to be quite honest. I've only done that once, a couple of times before, and I just find it, I just need more confidence as I go along. And these steps certainly cut into your income, but they get me to a piece or a panel or a page that I'm happier with, and that looks better than it would have been if I had just gone in inks over one set of pencils or whatnot. Yeah, there's a lot of fixing up and moving things around that can be done just in the pencil stage without having to print or throw stuff out. It's tiring, but it's the way I work. I mean, there are some people who have really uh, uh, busy work ways of doing things. You know, Pete Bagg, I think he draws, he flips it on a light box and then draws over it again to correct all the mistakes you make when you, because everything's skewed a little bit, even the best artists, if you flip it and look at it on the light box, you will see that thing's slanting or this is not, and he will redraw it based on that. And I believe he still works that way. And then I'm not sure if there's another step there, I forget. But I mean, there's so many different ways to work. And that's the way I work most of the time.
Tell me a little bit about your writing process and how. Sorry, can you hear me?
Oh yeah.
Hey,
I was
sorry.
just shooting myself in the head metaphorically.
uh, Tell me a little bit about your writing process and how it differs from when you're writing an issue that you yourself are going to draw and when you hand off to a different artist.
Right. Generally, most of the work that I write that way, or I co-write with Sarah, is full script. And it goes through the usual that a lot of people, you've got a pitch of a plot. They, again, because of the way my process goes and the way I think, and literally my anxiety, because I don't like to turn in anything that has questions attached to it. And again, this takes me longer maybe, and it does. It takes longer, and I'm not one of these people who can do 8 books a month. I don't even understand people who can write 4 books a month. I'm in awe of that and jealous of that. At the same time, I think some of these people shouldn't be writing 8 books a week. It's good for your income. I don't know if it's so great for the books, but that's arguable. Obviously, if you can write 8 books, there's a desire for people to have those 8 books out, and you're doing well and popular or whatever you're delivering, or you're well liked and bankable. But I could never write 8 books a month or 1 a week. I'm just not. I mean, I used to before I realized anybody was paying attention. I would write a script in a night. I would just bang it out on a typewriter and then turn it in. That was on some of my earliest stuff, like Wild Nights. And I mean, it's not that I had no respect for it, but I just worked on it the way that I was working on my screenplay classes at NYU. I was first drafting them and just turning them in, and they had enough stuff going on. They weren't brilliant or anything, but it took me 1 or 2 days to, I had the idea. I ran with it. I mean, also the editing was super light. They didn't ask me what was going on beforehand because it was the early days of the black and white explosion, and you could print anything, 22 pages of anything after the Turtles, because people were just buying it as an investment first, and then as a reading experience second. That's what the stores were buying it for. And then people were not buying it, and that's why we had the collapse. But the problem is I have disciplinary issues that it's very hard for me to sit down and do a block out 22 pages, 20 pages, 24 for another artist, because I don't write that way for myself. If I'm doing a strip by myself, like if I'm doing a fun strip, a 4-panel gag, it will just look like nobody else could make a strip out of it, because it's just mental notes on paper. It's usually a quick square and then a couple of words in each one, or maybe a line of dialogue or a couple of stick figures, and then I just draw that straight ahead to either depending on the strip, it's supposed to look choppy or it's more detailed. But there's no script for something like that. There's no script for a milk and cheese strip. There's a bunch of notes in my notebook or on a piece of paper, and there's just a lot of dialogue and doodles. And then I break that down and improvise on the page. That's how most of Milk and Cheese, Dork, Eltingville got done. I think the only time I ever had to do a script for Eltingville was when I turned something in for Wizard Magazine, because they needed to go over it for their standards and this, that, and the other thing. But generally I just turn in doodles, or I turn in nothing at all and just say, here's the 2 pages. When I'm writing Beasts of Burden or Blackwood, or co-writing the Marvel Snapshots or Beasts of Burden with Sarah, it's going to be a breakdown of the plot, and I never turn that in unless I figured out the ending, or we've figured out the ending. Again, this is another reason why I have to rethink how I relate to comics as a business, because I'm slow. I'm a slow writer. My cat's going nuts about a bird over there. Sorry. I can't turn in. I don't like showing my work. It's something that I'm learning to do, even as I'm like 4 years away from 60. I don't like showing rough sketches. I don't like showing an unfinished plot pitch. This has everything to do with me and nothing to do with the industry or with editors. I have problems showing a client or a friend even, I always am afraid that what I'm showing is that I don't know what I'm doing. This is a deep-rooted anxiety that I'm fighting against. it's part of the process. It's part of the process that a lot of people don't like to talk about if they have these issues. There's reasons why some artists don't turn a lot of work or turn out a lot of books. And it's not always because they don't have to, because they've got other means of income, or they really like to deliberate, or they're just not driven. Sometimes it's because they're being held back by their personalities or their anxieties. And that's the problem I had. I went from being extremely prolific in the 90s to sputtering out for various reasons in the aughts, partly because I was doing more animation work, partly because of my situation with SLG Publishing. They didn't have an upfront page rate, so I was pragmatically, I could not publish with them, and I only did like 2 issues of Dork during that time, until I went to Dark Horse and they were able to fund the last 2 Eltingville comics. I mean, on the other hand, those books have not made Dark Horse any money, the Dork and the Eltingville books, so I feel terrible about that, but those are books that should have come out 10 years earlier when I had more of a following on that stuff, I guess. I'm proud of those books, but there are reasons sometimes why something. I mean, those books did very well in the 90s. Those comics. I won Eisners for a lot of those stories. Whether that means they're great or not, it at least means people were buying them and paying attention. By the time that they got collected, it was just a little past the right time for them. Timing sometimes can be super important on a project. Most of the time, timing is important. The longer you wait to get something out, usually the longer people have forgotten about the material. That's something that's hobbled Beast of Burden. I'm off topic. Scripts, because the way my mind races and things like that, I have real trouble organizing. Sarah's fantastic at that, at breaking down scripts and plot ideas that we have. I will have to basically do a writer's version of the red pencil, blue pencil. I'm working on a Beast of Burden story that I'm moving forward on, even though right now it doesn't have a home or a reason to be. But it's a story that I've been it's a story that's been in the back of my mind for a long time, and it's in my notebooks. I mean, a lot of the scripts start off as just lots of notes in my notebooks or on the computer. I used to make copious notes, but they used to kind of stop me from figuring out what was going on because I had too many lines to choose from. I kind of have to come in with the blue pencil over the red pencil of all those notes, if that makes sense. I would have to create order out of chaos. So what I do nowadays is I try to create less chaos. So the story that I'm working on right now, I finally broke the spine of this thing. It was a story that I just couldn't. It was important in some ways to one of the characters, but it wasn't necessary to the entire storyline. I couldn't figure a way to make it work past the basic idea. And after a couple of years, because the way Beast of Burden works, we don't get that many stories out. So we were doing other ones before I could get to this, but I figured it out. I made 2 pages of notes that were mostly ideas in order, a line of dialogue, an action, a thing that needs to happen, a visual idea for the artist. That then I'll break down into 20 pages, what happens on each page. And then I finally have something to work from. Sometimes I've jumped ahead without doing that refining process, which is a terrible way to do things. It's kind of like going to inking without penciling. And I've tried to write a script based on not having that breakdown done because I get jumpy and I want to start working on it. And I end up costing myself time because basically I've gone to inks without a good skeleton. If I don't have a good skeletal breakdown of the plot, I'm going to fumble because I have too many ideas, usually for every story. Every story can go 24 pages. If you look at my career, there's a lot of books that I've worked on where the page count has gone way past what it was supposed to be. I asked for an extra 2 pages, or in my own books, I've done 28 pages rather than 22, 24. When comics went from 24 pages to 22 and then to 20 has really hurt me. I really like the 24-page rhythm of 8 pages per act, 8-page acts. I also break down the pages as sort of like a sequence. If you look at Beasts of Burden and Blackwood, a lot of them will have an entire act almost on a page, a 3-act sequence, beginning, middle, end, to get to a certain point to that page turn. It's a very compartmentalized way of working. because of my needing things to be concrete, if that makes sense, of needing to have tight control over everything because I worry it's going to spin out of control. It takes me a long time to write a 4-issue series. It takes me a long time to write a 1-issue because it's really hard to do it done in one. A lot of Beasts of Burden were done in ones, 22 pages, 8 pages. It started as an 8-page story. It was never supposed to be anything more than that. So we've been filling in backstory and foreshadowing and the current series based on all the notes that I've done since 2003, and we're still getting to those. So the story will be broken down. I don't write necessarily with the artist in mind at first. Then I start trying to figure out what, like working with Ben Dewey on Beast, I'm like, what is, on the second one, Occupied Territory, I was like, what does Ben like to draw? Can I move some, get some stuff in there that's not as tight as what was in Wise Dogs and Eldritch Men when I didn't know Ben's work, how to work with Ben at the time. But generally I don't, if I'm working with an artist on something like, hey, like I'm working with somebody, I'm hoping to work on somebody on a Beast of Burden crossover, and I know kind of things that person would like to see in there. So sometimes I'll ask the artist, do you want to, is there anything you want to see? Is there anything that you would like to do? I'll see if I bring boards an idea or if it is something I can work into there. But in general, yeah, I mean, it goes from scribbles in a notebook to typing things up into a plot. Plot gets approved or doesn't get approved because sometimes, like Beasts and Blackwood, after a certain while, I'm just doing it. If they approve the storyline, Dark Horse and Dan Shaven, then the details aren't as important there because they know the characters and whatnot. So on something like Occupied Territory, here's the plot. I did have a beginning, middle, and ending. I tend not to turn a plot in until I have an ending. I need to know where the thing's going to go because I'm terrified that I'm going to get caught up. I mean, it's never happened where I don't know where this story is going, but I'm still need to know where things are mapped out, or else I'll feel like people think I'm bullshitting and I don't know what I'm talking about, and then I will be found out. It's that what's the
Like imposter syndrome or
imposter syndrome? Yeah, which is a big problem with a lot of people in creative arts. I mean, in life, which is funny because the way you find out these people have imposter syndrome is you see their work and they talk about it. And the conundrum is the only way that people see your work is if it's out there and you're a working professional. Generally, you have an audience. And if you have an audience, like I was saying about the original art and about liking yourself and your work, your art, you have to realize that you can't please everyone. You're not going to, especially in this day and age where the loudest mouths are people who probably don't even read or see the work or care about it. They just want to make an issue of it. Or they're deranged or have an agenda. You're not going to get that unconditional love from the industry or the direct market or from everyone. You're going to get what you're going to get. You're inviting people along for the ride. Not everybody wants to go for the ride with you in your work, especially when you're coming out of the market. I'm not knocking the direct market for this because I grew up in this, but the direct market was basically around Marvel, DC, and a few companies that caught on, and it was not conducive. I mean, you could Fantagraph. Nobody puts out single issue comics. Humor comics anymore or single issue comics anymore. I don't even know if Adrian Tomine is still doing it, but generally nobody's putting out, none of the major publishers or the major minor publishers are still putting out Hate, 8-Ball, anthologies, Dork, Milk and Cheese, Too Much Coffee Man, Dirty Plot, all the stuff that I grew up in coming into the industry. They are all younger artists are making those web comics or they are making them Kickstarters, and the direct market does not want solo anthologies or intermittent, put out a Dork every 2 years or 3. There's just no way to do that anymore. It's not viable. It's become more of a book market. You're going to collect 4 issues, but if you're not going to do 4 issues for 3, 4 years, 5 years, nobody wants to publish that generally. Dark Horse would do a Milk and Cheese series, but I'd have to do 4 of them. And Milk and Cheese barely does, shouldn't be 1 issue every like 17 years or something like that. I think at a certain point, Dark Horse would have put out Dork if they knew that there were going to be 3 issues coming fairly quickly after that, and that's just not going to happen. And which is why something like Dork is something kind of becoming a Patreon fixture, where I'm doing new comics and showing the comics that haven't been collected on my Patreon, and eventually I make a PDF of that. Either I put it on Gumroad and sell it, or I make it part of a later collection with somebody when I have enough pages. But it's not an option for the industry right now, if it's not going to get worked into a book. And I'm not going to do 120 pages at one shot of humor gags with my style. It would just take me forever, especially with no income coming in for something like that. So it's a slow method for me. Again, off topic. Writing idea, breakdown, idea, pitch, breakdown, and then hours of terror. I'm amazed that I've worked on the animation strips, because they were terrifying for me. I was just always, the Imposter Syndrome was so strong on that stuff. And the Imposter Syndrome is still strong, even though I fight it. It's very hard for somebody like me to be working on something that there's really not much money in, and I'm in a situation where I need money. Like back in the day, I could do so much shit for free, or there wasn't good money in it. It didn't matter. I was a bachelor, and then Sarah and I were living together. We didn't have family. We didn't have a house. We didn't have insurance. And once insurance was something that you had to get to start a family, it changes. There's a life process that affects your work process. What you can do, what you choose to do, how you work, how you can't work. I can't take on a monthly book. I would love to. I would love to have done Beasts of Burden monthly, but I wouldn't have been up to it. Jill wouldn't have been up to it. So it wasn't a monthly. I would have liked to have gone monthly with Blackwood. I think that could have happened, when I got my shit together more recently, but Blackwood is not super viable. And so there's no chance of that right now. But I want to continue these things because of my obsessive personality. I have worked out Blackwood. Veronica and I have talked about, and Andy, we know what Blackwood leads to in the future, how it ends. I know how Beast of Burden ends. I've known for 15 years. All the side stories with the Wise Dogs and all these other stories are coming together over the 18 years that we've worked on this thing, but I've always known the ending. I've always known some of the characters' fates and things like that, and the ultimate plot, and where we stop, if we stop. But I've never been the kind of person who can just bang stuff out. That's not a knock on people who can. That's a facility that they have, and a confidence, or at least an ability to work, to function at a higher pace. And that's what comics needs, and publishing. You need to get material. You get to get a lot of work out there, and even if none of it does that, even if you're not doing great with anything, you build up a library, and hopefully there's a bit of royalties from every little bit of business, and then you get foreign pickups, and then for a lot of people they get TV shows and movie option stuff. And I've had that. Beast of Burden was picked up by Real Effects. Eldingville was a pilot. I had a lot of offers on Milk and Cheese back in the day, but you can't work with that you can't work with those eggs, thinking those eggs are in your basket. And I never have. I've always made comics for comics' sake. I've never written stuff to be a pitch. That's another aspect of the writing process. Are you trying to make this thing a show for Netflix or whoever? Because there are a lot of people since Hollywood got super interested, and since Hollywood people started to be making comics as a way to generate their own intellectual property cheaply, or to get their name attached to a property, like Keanu Reeves with Berserk. I mean, he can do it whatever he wants, but it's a really good, cheap way to get your work uh, copyrighted and generate a little bit of money. If an actor or film director or writer gets their extra ideas out in comics. That was really happening big time at a certain point. The Kevin Smith factor, but they were all working at doing stuff on Marvel and DC stuff. And now you see so many creator-owned comics are attached to some screenwriter or somebody, and it's a way to just, kind of pipeline that stuff, get it out there and stake it as your own, so that you can make a deal with a company rather than give it up to a company, or make a new deal with them, and all the other stuff that goes on, all the kibitzing. But everything I write is for the comic. I just want to work on the comics. I would love it if there was something option, just so that I could, if there was something that was made, I would just love it because it would make more comics possible. Right now, Beasts of Burden is not happening because of pragmatic reasons. It's not making enough money to generate a good income. And part of that is because I don't work fast enough, and part of that is because the book was on a terrible schedule for a long time. We've gotten more issues out in the last couple of years than we did in the first 7 years of the book, 12 years of the book. But the gap between books happened. So I'm in a precarious position right now with Beasts. The reality is that it's not as attractive a prospect to get artists, I guess, as it used to be. So that they can be paid what they're worth, and trying to figure that out, because it's my favorite book. I mean, I love my solo work, but there's something about Beasts of Burden that I find, no pun intended, magical. I love working on that book. I mean, I loved working with Jill. I didn't like the way things went, but when we were working, when she was working and we were getting our stuff together, it was fantastic. And I love working with Ben and Nate Picos. It's what I would do full time if I could. But I'm going all over the place. You're catching me at a time where I'm really thinking a lot about this stuff. But I mean, the process. I mean, I understand the writing process more than I understand the drawing process. Let's put it that way. There is some dummies calling me on my phone. Sorry about that. Some dummy.
No worries.
Yeah, I've just been fired, I guess. Well, I'm not hired on anything, but the writing process is, I mean, I'm good on ideas. I'm not good at going forward with them because of my second guessing. I'm getting better at that. Bill and Ted, Bill and Ted was something where it had to get done fast. It fell in my lap. The Bill and Ted thing had to coincide with the release of the third film, and I was really excited to work with Roger Langridge. At first, I wasn't sure. I don't know, Roger, the Rock. No, but he's a fantastic. I love Roger as a person. I adore Roger's cartooning. So I was like, Schmuck, what's wrong with you? Daniel was like, he was practically like, Schmuck, what's wrong with you? Like, so I was like, I always wanted to work with Roger, but I wasn't sure if this was right, because I always have the hesitancy to make decisions and say yes. I mean, I didn't want to do the Hellboy crossover on Beasts of Burden, and it was our most successful issue, and it got us a lot of readers. But I was scared of the responsibility of doing a crossover that sucked, because so many crossovers suck. Which gives you an insight as to how I approach something, rather than go, this is an opportunity to do a story, and then this is an opportunity to sell books. I think this is an opportunity to fuck up. That's why I'm in therapy. But I've been getting more scripts done over the last few years. I mean, I'm really feeling in a better place. And now I have no work. With Bill and Ted just fell into place, and we got the 4 issues done on time, got them out. I was very happy with them. I think they're funny. I think it's adorable series. It works with the movies, and I just jumped in and did it. Didn't think about it as much, and that's kind of the approach I want to take to my work. Not to not think about it, but not think about it to the point where it makes you hitch. So, I'm a slow artist, but writing, that's what I mean, I really like writing, to be honest. I really like working with another artist because I don't like to draw all the stuff that I write. I can't draw dogs. I can't draw forests very well. I draw very cartoony, I draw like Mad Magazine. If Mad Magazine was putting out more stuff since the magazine kind of halted and they're doing specials, that was a bummer. Nickelodeon magazine going down, Mad Magazine going down, Marvel, DC not doing stuff like Bizarro anymore, changing, kind of losing their smile. If they do something that's jerky, if they do something that's funny or weird, it still has to be Jimmy Olsen, or it's got to be Batman meets somebody, or it's got to be Hanna-Barbera characters that Warner Brothers owns crossing over with the Flintstones and superheroes. Again, I'm not knocking that. People seem very, very happy with a lot of that work. The Jimmy Olsen team is terrific people, very talented, but the idea that everything that you do at DC now has to be superheroes in some way or shape or form practically is stultifying. And back in the day, they had Vertigo. They'd have independent. True, it was still superheroes, but it was straight out cartooning. They'd have like basically all the independent artists would get jobs on that stuff. Marvel would do some weird stuff like with Epic. Murder Family started at Marvel of all things. There was a bit of a looseness that's just tightened up so much as the IP has become so important to them, and trying new things. DC tried a lot of stupid new things, or things that just didn't work. They tried to go into European comics. They tried to do manga. They did everything half-assed. They bought other companies. They had the money to blow back then and not be noticed. But the industry's just tightened up so much as far as the way Marvel and DC approaches things. And it's what's best for them, obviously, is to just concentrate on become McDonald's and not have extra stuff. Or if you're going to have extra stuff, it's super limited and has to be based on what they can make in that kitchen. The independent world doesn't mix as well as it used to back in like 2000, 2004. There's no world funnest. There's no place for me in these companies. So yeah, what am I doing here? What's this fucking, did you go to sleep yet? Are you
No, I'm
asleep?
here.
Hi.
Can you hear me?
You can jump in. You can jump in and build on anything I'm saying because I'm definitely off again, this is what I do, unfortunately. The way I talk, okay, here's the thing. The way that you're hearing me and the way that I'm answering these questions, this is my process. This is my writing process. I have to go through so much bullshit that my brain generates, circling the problem, circling the story. I get to it, and I think it's entertaining, but there's a lot of sketching. There's a lot of typing and throwing things out that I've got to go through, which limits my ability to hone in on what I'm supposed to be doing. And it is something that, I'm rambling here, but if you see some of my older interviews, I'm rambling, trying to be funny, being super nervous. I'm rambling, I'm going off on things and ranting. I'm not making a ton of sense. I sound like a goof. At least I think I'm making sense now, when I talk to people. I'm certainly calmer. And it's all like I said, your life process affects your work process. My life process is very complicated. And it's something that I am making inroads on understanding, identifying, and when I need to, fixing. And that's something that I'm working on in my work. It's unfortunate that it's coming at a time when the industry has expanded and has a much larger bench of talent, has younger fans who don't know who people my age are or care, and a lot of my fan base has left the hobby over the years. And there's less need for somebody like me in the standard way that comics are made and packaged and presented. At the same time, though, we talked before we started, that the internet has provided a way out that we didn't have when you age out of the You don't age out of the industry now, you age out of the companies. And it used to be that when you aged out of the companies, you did age out of the industry. If your style was no longer in fashion, if a new editor came in and didn't care for your work or just wanted to hire more of their friends, because there's a reality there, and more of the people that they're a fan of, which is they're right. When Dan Didio came in DC, the Metalman series that I was working on, which was late, but a lot of things are late, got canceled because he didn't care for it. That sucked. I complain about it. I talk about it as a reality of the industry, but I also say that was his prerogative and his right, for whatever reason, even if I didn't agree with it, to cancel that book. And these things happened. That's the last DC work I think I've done. Oh, I did something for Wednesday Comics, but I've usually been hired. Like Marvel didn't hire me and Sarah to do Marvel Snapshots. Kurt Busiek hired us, and I thank him for that. That was a great experience, and we got to work with Ben Dewey. So it was like Team Beasts of Burden doing a Marvel story, and Kurt felt that this was a story that Sarah and I could bring things to based on our other work, which is all you ever ask when it comes to work for hire and things like that. But Marvel's not interested in me, or I've said things that have upset people at Marvel, but they've never even heard anything I've said, and they just don't know my work or care for my work. I don't fit into the plans. That's going to happen to so many of us, whether it's a personal thing, professional thing, or both. I have no idea if I pissed anybody off at Marvel or DC. I've been fairly outspoken about certain things, and I crack jokes, and sometimes I'm very open about certain things. And maybe I wasn't very politic about things, and I burned a bridge here and there. At the same time, you can burn a bridge if it's not going anywhere. I really don't have much of a career at Marvel and DC. I never did. And I realized that I wasn't really making money when I worked on the projects because I was never going to work on big projects. I was always going to work on weird niche stuff that I enjoyed. Partly my fault, partly the way I'm built. So I'm falling out of an industry, but I'm also falling out of an industry that never really fed me much. It's just, it helps to get your name out there, and it's nice to get the books. The paycheck is always better from Marvel and DC than it is from almost anywhere else, except like Mad or things like that. But you sell the artwork; it's a good deal here and there. It's good enough for certain things. So, but now we have now if your book wasn't doing great from Dark Horse or Image or whoever, you can go kickstart further volumes. You can go to Patreon and put up new chapters. You can do a web comic if you have the ability to do that. You can put your stuff on Gumroad. You can collect it later with one of those companies. There are so many more options right now for somebody who is a mid-carder and not a top star, but has a following, has a backlog of work and some credibility. So it's an interesting time. And again, I'm off balance. I'm spilling everything rather than answering your question. So let's cut that there. And you ask if you have a specific question about my writing.
Actually, I do have a question about your.
And I'll hold a pen and cross my fingers and try to answer it like a real person.
I do have a question about your approach to panel storytelling, because I think when people think of the traditional comics page, it's that 9-panel grid. But with a lot of your work, especially with Dork or Milk and Cheese, sometimes you have 16 or 20 panels or more on a page. Like you have very, very dense pages in terms of content and how much story you pack into a page. So I'm curious, you spoke about how sometimes you go into these pages without a detailed plan, but in terms of getting everything you want done on a single page, how do you approach that? And what are the challenges to your approach?
again, I come at things sometimes, I come at things often from the negative approach, because putting all that on a page certainly eats up your time. A lot of the detail work that I did is why my hand is a mess. A lot of it was overcompensating. A lot of it was not editing well. I'm not a good editor. I can edit somebody else's work, I think. I'm not talking about being an editor. I'm not good at, I would not be good at being an editor at a publisher. But I think I'm a good story editor. I'm good at breaking down why something doesn't work, or why some scene doesn't work, how you can punch something up, what you can lose. But when it comes to my own work, I don't kill enough of my darlings, if you know what I mean. I'm getting better at that. Again, like the Bill and Ted, Blackwood, Beasts of Burden, I have been able to understand the needs of the artist better and not overwhelm them with my aesthetic, which is to just pour as much shit onto a page as possible. Because on the one hand, I'm afraid of throwing out a good joke, or I'm afraid of throwing out a good bit, which is terrible. You should really hone things. I don't think it's that bad in a humor comic, however. I think that if I was handing a script like that to an artist, I would understand it if they would come to my house and put a knife in my throat. I'd say, yeah, twist it. I get it. I wouldn't want to draw this. I don't write for people the way that I write for myself, obviously. When I write for myself, I'll punish myself with panels, 22 panels on a page. The fun strips that I did were 22 panels a page. No, 7 times 4, 28, 29 panels a page. And I did, like, I don't know, 110, 20 of those. Nobody forced me to do that. I always liked excess. I liked the silent movies where they would just destroy a town. I liked science fiction movies where they blew up everything. I liked superhero fights in comics when there were mass bodies flying about. I liked Mad Magazine when they were just chock full of detail. I mean, Mad Magazine probably is what really did it for me. Looking at those 50s comics that Kurtzman and Elder did, that would be collected in the Mad Specials. They just had a hold on me, and all the chicken fat that Will Elder put into those panels, I just found that fascinating and funny and extra, and I appreciated the effort gone into them. And when I do my humor comics, especially Dork and things like that, and the Milk and Cheese stuff, I just really like the patter of the showbiz patter and the wrestling ranting that Milk and Cheese do, and I just would go with it. And the same way that, like, wrestling promos go out of control and aren't really scripted and usually go on too long, that's the way Milk and Cheese kind of talk, and that's the way they do things. And those strips have gotten more and more tight and detailed, partially because I only had so much room when I was, like, given a job to do. Can you give us a Milk and Cheese strip? Yeah, we've got 2 pages, we've got 4 pages, and I would just try to get in so many jokes. I mean, I'm a maximalist, and I'm fighting that for the realities, as I talked about earlier. So as a cartoonist, I'm trying to remember who said this to me. It might have been Darwin Cook. It sounds like something he would have said to me, but I was told by somebody once who was looking at my pages and just going like this. They were just like, "You're not paid by the line." And they weren't being like, hack it out, come to the dark side and just, knock things out, or don't add backgrounds, or, but I definitely I know that I've turned readers off because they look at my comics and they go, this is like reading a book. And I've always liked giving, it's a 2-pronged approach of, I like giving the reader a ton of stuff. I always have. I like giving the reader value. I want each story, I want an issue of Beasts of Burden to be a real story, not a bunch of shit happening with 3-panel pages and let the artist do all the work, and not just, beautiful visuals or whatever, just to get the book done. to kind of coast anywhere. I don't like to waste a page. I'm not saying this is a good approach, mind you. I'm saying this is my approach. That I approach every page as an opportunity to get a really good. I want every page to have something interesting on it. I try to have. One of the reasons I've fucked up my career is that I've tried to have every panel have something interesting in it, and that's not a great idea either. That's not a great idea, even if you're being paid well and you have all the time in the world. For the story itself, the process itself. Like, I mean, Sarah gets it. And sometimes you have to have a character say, when I'm writing dialogue, I want the dialogue. I don't want the dialogue to necessarily be clever, but I don't want it to be cliched, and I don't want it to go against character. I want every character to sound like that character. I don't like reading a comic where you could cover up the dialogue. You can cover up the art, and you can't tell who's talking because of the dialogue. There are certain superhero writers and genre writers and cartoonists who do this. Their characters all have the same cadence. They all sound like they're educated. They all went to the same school. They have the same interests, the same pop culture references. Man, woman, queer, straight, unless they have signifiers, like they're making a joke about being from Wakanda or being queer or being white bread. You can't tell, who's talking here. And like a perfect example, as basic as it is you look at the old Fantastic Four comics. And it's cliche writing. But if you covered up the art, you'd go, well, that's Johnny. That's Reed. He's smart guy. Johnny's hot guy, hot tempered guy or slangy kid guy. Sue is horribly cliched woman. And Ben is, Brooklyn bruiser. And that's not always followed in comics, that's not always followed where, and that doesn't mean dialect, and that doesn't mean that some character has to keep, dropping his G's or anything like that. But in Beast of Burden and in Blackwood, I really try very, very hard to make sure, and I like large casts. That's another maximalist problem I have. God only knows where that came from. Maybe from watching It's a Mad, 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 Mad World too many times, or we're just loving all the extras in Star Wars, that there was a million characters in Star Wars. I mean, I just liked lots of stuff. I like the believable world with characters that have their own personality, and and a lot of people do that. I'm not saying I'm the only one at all, or the best at it, but it's something that I work very, very hard for. But at the same time, sometimes I'll be sitting there trying to write when I was at my worst anxiety about the work I was doing and thinking too hard about what I was doing and thinking too hard about what the editor will think of me, what the publisher will think of me, what the other creators will think of me, what the readers will think of me, none of which is important at the time that you're writing. You should be thinking about whether the story works. If you're going to think about the audience, you should be thinking about respecting the audience on one hand, and that giving them a good story. And then on the other hand, not giving a fuck about what the audience says, because the audience doesn't get their say. They can go write their own shit, and they don't have to buy this. I'm writing this the way that I think it should be written. And eventually that's going to be what wins out. As much as I write for my readers and for my fans, I write for myself, and I write for the story. I write for the characters. That shit all has to be true. That doesn't mean I'm doing the best job on earth or that I'm succeeding, but it has to be true. It should not be forced. It should not be hacked. It should not be phony. It should not be just shit out because I have more work to do on something else. It should please me as best as possible, even if I hate it while I'm working on it, if that makes any sense. But the thing is, sometimes your dialogue has to be just dialogue. Sometimes a character has to say, I'm going to the store. Does anybody want anything? Not sitting there for a day at my worst, or 20 minutes going, oh, this panel is so fucking boring. I mean, Jamar is telling them I'm going to the store. Does anybody want anything? How can I make that funny? Or how can I make that interesting? No, sometimes your character just needs to say, I'm going to the fucking store. Does anybody fucking want anything? And no pop culture references, no jokes, no cleverisms, no anything. It's just a functionary panel. And the same thing visually. Sometimes you just need to show this character going, I'm going to the store. And they're going to the fucking store because it's a link to other things. It's important because you're placing things, you're setting things up, whatever. And the same thing with dialogue when like you're scared of a cliche. Like I hate if monsters are coming and characters are going, look out, or there's monsters coming. Well, you can't really get around that. If a building blows up and there's fire, people are going to yell, holy shit, fire, get the fuck out. Now, my brain overthinks these things and micromanages a lot of the time. It goes, oh, fuck, look out, or here they come, or, they're catching up to us, when you're writing, or I love you, or whatever the fuck. You want to try to get around those things, but you can't. They're the way people act. They're what people say when, shit blows up. They go, holy shit. If you can't write, oh, holy shit, because you're doing a mainstream comic, you have to come up with the equivalent. Or you have to come up with something that functions to show that the characters are scared, mad, surprised, shocked, into silence even. Sometimes it's really good to just go have somebody say nothing. I should try to do that more often. But as you can see, I talk a lot, I write a lot, and you have to accept in your panel to panel that sometimes you're going to have to put something in that's just a connector, between two things. And you can't try to be Joss Whedon, which I would never fucking want to be. I dislike the man. I dislike his writing. Neither here nor there. But when you're trying to be clever for every single thing, like I'm going to the store, does somebody want any pop culture reference kind of thing or something like that? I think there's also an authorial anxiety when you're trying to control every single thing to the degree that nothing can be relaxed. And it's something that I fight. And authorial anxiety is basically when you have to show people that you're writing, or you have to show off, or you're very proud of yourself or something, and it comes off on the page, or you're in love with a character to the point where that character becomes nauseating, or whatever, or you're just into your own tricks, or you're into your own catchphrases, or the need for catchphrases. It's like I was accused a lot of being pop culture crazy, that all my characters had to do pop culture stuff. And I was like, well, it's where I came from, and I thought that pop culture was such a big thing that it's worth writing about. And I'd be like, if comics are a major thing, comics is a big thing of our lives before it became Disney and Warner Brothers craziness, where every week the direct market comes out in theaters. I thought if this is an endeavor that people work on and stuff, I can be serious about pop culture, even if I'm making fun of it. But yeah, pop culture is important. This is the way my friends talk. This is the way people talk about certain things, and these are the jokes I like to make. But at the same time, Beast of Burden is a book that has absolutely no pop culture references in it. I have to make sure I don't put any in. The animals don't know about it. The panel to panel process is, like I said earlier, I try not, I'm doing it more than I think I should possibly, but I see each page as a story. A lot of people probably, but I see it as I don't set it up necessarily as a 3 acts. But if you look through a lot of my work, you can find the 3 acts in those pages. You do the turn page, there's a new scene, there are new requirements of what we have to get through to get to the next scene. I'm very uptight about transitions between scenes being fluid, not too gimmicky. I used to really like having characters say something in the last panel of a page and then having that carry over into the next panel to introduce something ironic or to introduce a scene. I really like the way that works, but if you do it all the time, it just becomes it becomes a noticeable constant, and you're trying to be clever a lot of the times to say something funny or interesting when you set up that next scene. I mean, that's a direct choice that I'm trying not to pursue all the time. And sometimes just letting things breathe. Let the artist have a panel or two. Let's see how beautiful this is. Put in less. What can I pull out of this? When you see the art come in, it's an interesting thing, because when I don't do this with my own work, but when you see Ben's art come in, or Jill's art come in, or Veronica's art come in, or Roger's, or whoever you're working with, when they've gone through their process of storytelling, and they've basically done the cinematography and the acting and the set design and all that stuff, whether you describe part of it or not, they've done their invisible writing. Artists write. I don't want to get into that debate while we have limited time, and I don't want to keep you all night, but that whole thing of artists versus writers. When I'm drawing, I'm writing. It's not just storytelling scene setup, but I'm taking direction from the writer, and I'm using the story, but I'm making decisions. And especially when writers come in and they work Marvel method and they basically leave up the heavy lifting to the artist, there is no doubt in my mind, from experience, as a fan and as a person who's in comics, the writer part of that, the artist's job is to write. If you're told Spider-Man fights the Green Goblin for this page, and it should look really cool, and at some point one of them should like fall through a roof or something like that, so we get them into this laboratory, that's plotting, and then the rest of it has to be worked out, choreographed, set up, details added, breaking it down panel to panel. That's fucking part of writing. That's co-writing in my mind. If you're not going to write those panels, somebody else is, based on your notes. Anyway, yeah, my process now is to try to make things. How can I push as much into a page for the artist without overloading them? Because I remember when I was doing World's Funnest, when I asked Jaime Hernandez, Jaime said to me, only if you don't write more than 6 panels a page. So I was like, oh yeah, I forget. People's, my work is ridiculous that way. But that's the choice I make on my own work. I can't ask people to do that in the strips. So how do I break things down further so that they don't have to draw? Nobody does 9 panels on a page, except when it's specified for a specific reason. We're breaking time down. We have room for this. It's a series of actions that are small. You need more panels to show. If I need to show somebody it's going through their keys and there's horror and there's other things, you need smaller panels. That you do not need a large panel for some of these reaction shots and back and forth and glance object, person looking, cut to the object, cut back to the person looking and reacting, if the object is a Yeti or their girlfriend or their boyfriend or the sun exploding, whatever the fuck. You'll need extra panels for those things. And sometimes you'll find that you're trying to fit too much onto a page and you got to cut that stuff out. As much as you love this joke, I can fit the joke in because I'm stupid. I'll letter all around the characters. That's my own time. That's my own kind of comics. But if you're doing storytelling, basically traditional storytelling with an artist who you want to work with again and not be punched out at the next Heroes Con, you got to give them a break and you got to give them some leeway. They can't draw comics the way that you write them. Jill specifically said, I can only do 5 panels a page because of the way her watercoloring works out. Now, that's not really true because Jill does more than 5 panels a page when she wants to, but it's a good groundwork, and it's a boundary that you set up. So the artist basically tells you, take it easy. And there are pages where Jill has broken things down to 3 pages. She's broken down a page to 2 pages, and we had to go into more pages on Boy and His Dog because I was shoving too much action into that one, and I wasn't letting Sarah cut it down. So Jill requested doing more pages, and in the Hellboy one, she broke some stuff down to make more panels on pages. Ben doesn't tend to stretch or squash things. He'll change things and he'll approach things on his own way in the panels themselves. But I told Ben that if he wants to break things down further, then that's fine, which again is writing. How you approach the pages and how you lay them out, what you focus on, what details you add, the acting and all that. Your brain's involved in all that one, and you're adding material or taking material away. So yeah, you have to work with the human being that's doing your stuff, and you can't dictate that they work the way that you work. Um, it's just thinking about, what have you done that works and that you like? I mean, I like writing dialogue. I like it a little too much and I need to cut it down a lot of times. I don't like open pages unless they're warranted. I don't like doing 2 to 3 panel pages to make the issue go by faster. I don't like it I know a lot of artists. I know back in the day, I knew somebody who was working for DC, and there was an editorial meeting back in the day. I don't know how many people still have this attitude, but the artists were complaining to the editors to tell the writers to put less panels on the page for 2 reasons. One, they wanted to get the pages done faster. They didn't want to break down 9 panels, 7 panels, and do something. They liked having bigger panels, bigger figures, goes faster, supposedly. And 2, it was easier to sell original art when you had bigger panels, splashes, double page splashes, 2 panels, 3, 4, look better and sell better and sell for more money, which is true generally. But that's not a way to run a story. That's the tail wagging the dog in some ways, when you're taking away the ability to tell the story because you are excising panels, which is why I hated comics going from 24 pages to 20. It's not the money so much. I mean, yes, I want the extra 4 pages to be paid for, extra 2 pages to be paid for, although I've done pages for free if necessary, because you're like, what am I going to cut from this one? Am I going to? There are times where a story needs room, or the second Beast of Burden story we did really needed an extra page, but we couldn't have that extra page, and that ending is squeezed and bothers me to this day. Boy and His Dog got stretched 2 pages, and those last couple of pages that Jill did are fucking beautiful and work so well the way she did that. And with Ben, we've been able to, because we're doing a 4-issue series with one story, we've been able to open up a couple of double page spreads where the top is a full panel and there's a couple of panels at the bottom. I could never do that piece earlier. So there's this way where form dictates content to a degree. And if artists are willing to if artists go in on Beast or something like that, knowing that I like to tell a full story and I don't like to have a book that reads in 4 minutes, 5 minutes. I like to have a book people can sit down with. That's just my way of writing. That's my way of reading in a lot of ways, In manga, at least, there's fewer panels on a lot of them, but at least you're getting big, satisfying chunks of it. To the point where sometimes you're like, nothing's going on, and you're like, I can't believe I just read a chapter and 2 characters are just staring at each other for 8 pages. Somebody throw a fucking rock or something, with 20 pages. I get this is tense and this is cool, but and sometimes I'm jealous. I wish I had that much time to open things up and go looking at smaller moments. But with Beasts and with Blackwood, I will go in sometimes and have more panels. Veronica and Andy will sometimes Veronica will break it down and make more panels because she likes getting the stuff in there. Different artists have different ways of approaching things. If we're both really into what we're doing, we'll add more stuff because we don't know if we're going to have a 9th issue of Blackwood. So we want to get as much stuff established and told. Maybe there's a bit of that too. But yeah, that answers some of your question and a lot of others. I told you, and I'm trying to do this. Stay positive. It says right there, stay positive. Plug in laptop, stay positive. So yeah. Sometimes
Evan,
a lot of it's intuitive. A lot of it's intuitive, and also we don't just do a single draft. We really go over the work. If I'm working with Sarah and if I'm working with myself, she'll usually, so it gets different eyes on it. Sarah usually looks at a lot of the stuff I did. As life has gotten more hectic, not like Bill and Ted, I just did it, but Occupied Territory, she was putting in enough stuff that we were like, I would like, we're co-writing this. Let's co-write this one like some of the others. And then Daniel looks at it and Chuck. I mean, people look at it and people notice stuff. So it does. Nothing is a first draft. There's always changes. And then when you see the art, you can see where you need to. I've never really seen where I needed to add stuff because all the people I've worked with, they know their business. They know what they're doing. And I don't run into problems that I once had on a book where I worked on something back in the day and somebody did not turn in art that actually followed the script. And we had to drop a plot line because there was no time. And I basically had to get rid of, like, it was like if the Maltese Falcon didn't show up in the Maltese Falcon, and they had to like go, oh, well, somebody had the Maltese Falcon, but it broke. So yeah, and you're done. And I was like, oh, the vial with the stuff and that other thing. I've never dealt with that, luckily, again. And the people I work with, I can remove dialogue because they've done it in the acting and the set design and the choreography and the details. So I'm like, shit, this is showing and not telling. We don't need this balloon. Seeing the art come in is when the book really, really locks down, because you then when you can go, oh man, you know, with Jill's watercolors, we were really locked in. You couldn't change stuff. On Ben's watercolors, it was really hard. So if like somebody forgot, if Jill forgot the pendant on the cat on Dimphna, the art department had to go in and do stuff, and you know. Whereas if you could change colors of lettering now really easily, which is great. Although I'm very proud of the fact that Nate, our letterer Nate Picos of Blambot, his company, he's said nice things about the scripts we turn in, about the format and stuff. I don't want as detailed and as hard as I think my scripts are, that they require work. You know, if you're willing to work with me, you're good. I want people to work as hard as I work, if it's necessary. If you know what I'm saying. You know, you're not going to just knock this shit out. But I don't want to make the work harder for them. And I don't want to make the work harder for letterers, because letterers are the last person to get the book, and they get fucked over a lot, and they get crazy changes from writers who just want to just all of a sudden start writing. And I'm like, that's what happens when you don't know your story. That's what happens when you kick the ball, you know, kick the can down the street a couple of times, and then at the last moment you're like, whoa, I really meant to say this, or I don't like that. That's like, come on, you know, the letterer is not getting paid 18 times. You can't rewrite the script. You can rewrite a couple of things, but you know, that's the kind of stuff I don't think enough people talk about. Also, you know, how important lettering is. They're doing it more now, but man, the lettering is so fucking important. It's artwork on your page. It's visual component on your page. Treat it that way, not as just a empty soundtrack and some sound effects. Anyway, that was on my mind from some other shit. So sorry, you know. Look, I have a lot of comics. I love comics. I really do. I really do. I just talk negatively all the time, you know, a lot of the time. But seriously, stay positive. Does it say that? Stay positive.